first urban legends of vampires date as far back as 2000 BCE in ancient Mesopotamia. But back then they were called Ekimu, an ancient spirits believed to drain the life force of people that weren't properly buried. Further in time, in ancient Greece, they were called Empusa, a servant to the goddess Hecate that lured men and drank their blood. The first written mention of the word vampire, however, was in medieval Russia, back in the year 1047 AD. They used the word upir to describe what we now know as vampires. People's imagination was always fascinated with legends of these bloodthirsty sinister creatures that are scared of light. Well, in most cases. These legends eventually transformed into what we now know as Dracula Untold, Nosferatu, The Last Voyage of the Demeter, or on the other hand, Salem's Lot, Dracula 3000, Vampires Suck, and much more. There are many movies that are created around the legend, but few have managed to properly depict the image we have of Dracula or any other vampire. In example 1, you have stories such as trapped on the doomed ship with no escape, the crew slowly realizes that they are carrying something far worse than cargo. Dracula himself, hidden in the shadows, hunting them one by one as their fear turns into helpless horror. Dracula Untold, Nosferatu, or even series like Vampire Diaries. On the other hand, you have movies that didn't live up to the idea, such as Salem's Lot, Dracula 3000, or Vampires Suck. Instead of an eerie, slow-building dread like in the original novel, the film rushes throughout key moments, making once terrifying vampires feel more like generic TV monsters with awkward pacing and wooden performances. As with anything, you have two sides. One created a good depiction of vampires, and the other didn't. This is purely based on my opinion and expertise. For both types, there are people that loved it or hated it. Different people, different ideals, as one great writer said, and all of them had a different picture of what vampires should look like, how should they act, and where they might be located. Some envisioned vampires being like in the Vampire Diaries, with love stories and drama, and more like a human than a beast. Others were like me and wanted Dracula as a monster. Third ones wanted him as a demon, and so on. So if you ask 200 people what makes a great vampire movie, the answer will differ. Throughout my career, I have listed some stuff that I think are valuable when creating a different genres of movies, and today we will look at some I made for the vampire niche, as well as what I find interesting in today's movies and what I don't like. And for the end, I have prepared a sneak peek in one of my future books that will revolve around vampires and how I am planning to create the story, so stay till the end. But before we go into that, I have something very important to tell you, so please hear me out. I have spent years of my life creating stories, building character arcs, building worlds, until eventually it became this. My first book, Dark Folklore, which is now available, as you can see, as well as on the other side, on my website. Since the first book saw success, I thought it's time for chapter 2 to come out, and eventually for the entire story, because it's long, captivating, interesting, and whatever you want to think of. But I'll need your support for it. I decided to create 2 campaigns, one in Indiegogo and one in Kickstarter, so if you want to support me and the creation of the second book and get amazing rewards, you can go in the link in the description. Any support helps, regardless if it's just telling a friend, it's deeply appreciated. Now let's get back to the video. One legend, vampires, but 2 different categories of movies, one good and memorable and the other not so much. All of them had the same knowledge, the same stories and legends of vampires. So how do some of them create such depiction that takes the viewer on a lifelike journey a couple of centuries back, giving them an experience similar to the one the people from the legend felt themselves, while others make you feel as if you're watching another Conjuring movie? To answer this, we first must remind ourselves of the plots. In a desperate act to protect his kingdom from annihilation, Vlad Tepes drinks the cursed blood of an ancient monster, knowing it will damn his soul. A grotesque shadow slithers up the wall, its owner an inhuman figure with sunken eyes and clawed fingers, creeping towards his helpless prey, a force of ancient evil lurking in the darkness where no prayers will be heard. The creaking of the ship is drowned by the screams of men vanishing in the night, their blood painting the wooden decks. They are not sailors anymore, but rather cattle, trapped in a drifting coffin where something unseen watches, waiting, feeding. Both Nosferatu and the Demeter showcase the vampire properly. Throughout legends, vampires weren't displayed as a demon or some devious creatures coming from hell. That is why I like the Demeter so much, because it properly depicts Dracula as it is from the legends, a beast, a wild animal that is guided by his hunger. He doesn't care for your feelings, for your prayers, or for anything else. He wants to eat, and when he is hungry, he will. That is what I expect from Dracula. He is a monster, but he isn't a demon. There's a difference. I mentioned Dracula Untold because for me it is another interesting depiction of another variant of Dracula, again following the legends, but it is more of a mix between the legends about Vlad the Impaler and Dracula, the blend between the two. But all of these manage to properly immerse the viewer in the world of 19th or 18th century. As you're watching, it is almost as if you're in there with them, feeling the atmosphere, the vibe of that time, the smell and everything else. You get the sense that some of it was real. The movies feel more like a campfire story from your grandpa who lived through it rather than a fictional story. While on the other hand, with these you just feel different. A salvage crew in deep space discovers an abandoned ship, only to realize too late that its cargo holds an ancient evil. In my opinion, they just can't bring the same feeling, the same type of fear and unease. It's just different. One feels like a legend, passed on by generations. It just feels real and interesting, while the other feels like a parody, like a demonic possession movie with cringe CGI vampires. It just doesn't feel natural. You can't dive deep in the story and teleport yourself in 1895, sailing with the sailors, not knowing that on the same ship as you, there is an ancient beast waiting for the night so it can eat you. What I think is necessary for every vampire movie is the ability to convey the legend in the most realistic way possible. Imagine that it only took words from someone to instill those feelings in someone else back when there were only tales. Now if you do it properly, imagine how much you can do when you can visually show everything. What you need is to not create cringe CGI that becomes too much at one point, and to make Dracula into his natural light version, or whatever you want to call it. Dracula doesn't need to make jump scares in order to get your respect, just the name should speak for itself. The difference between vampires and demons should be clearly distinguished in your story, or in other words, Dracula shouldn't resemble a demon, but a human that became a beast, a monster. Now you know what it takes to visually embody the legend of vampires, which gets us to the last chapter: how am I planning my future book in that realm? The idea started with a dream of mine. We were back in the year 1485, deep in the Carpathian Mountains, in medieval Romania. A group of explorers sent there and funded by the Italian Church are seeking the fountain of youth that was believed to be somewhere in those particular mountains. They spent days searching, but without any progress, until one night they find a tunnel resembling that from the legends, and as it is believed, only a young, innocent girl before the age of 12 can enter and find it, because the fountain hides itself from those that desperately seek it, those which age has progressed and need it, while the girl is still so young and she hasn't yet felt the feeling of being scared of getting old. But as she enters and explores, she realizes that they have made the biggest mistake of their lives. This cave wasn't some miracle, but rather it was the prison of an ancient entity. He himself has been telling stories of this place, sending slaves to lie, so he can fulfill his only goal, to get a young girl and drink her blood. With that, he can regain his former power and break free. After he manages to escape by killing the girl, he goes on and kills 5 out of the 25 people there. The others he leaves to play with. One by one, he kills them slowly, draining every single drop. But because they all split, one group of 4 people finds an ancient scripture that points to the only thing that can stop this creature. This is still work in progress, but the problem is only a king can use it. He has to be crowned as a king of a nation. From that moment forward, there will be a ton of sinister moments, and Dracula slowly playing with the minds of his victims, instilling fear that they could have never imagined possible. This is the initial concept. What will become in the end? Well, you will find out when it sees the light of day. I focus on the sinister side of showing Dracula for what he is, monster, creature that will do anything in order to be set free and go on a frenzy, because his hunger for blood is eating him alive. He can't control it, and that makes him the monster that he is. Not superpowers or anything else, they're just a bonus. The other part is the setting, the air, the atmosphere of where they are, the legend, and so on and so forth. I want my viewers to be submerged in the story, almost as if they get trapped in the book with the characters, and feel what they feel. It still has work to do, so stay tuned for that as well. Thank you for watching, like, subscribe and share, and see you next time.